hope this is working. I cannot believe I'm doing this way. Blame my daughter. She thought this would be a great idea. Okay, let's continue. Example F. Women definitely hate this shirt. Just the other day, I was wearing this shirt while I was trying to pick up on this hottie at a gynecologist office, and she wouldn't give me the time of day. George? No, George, this is an appeal to ignorance. Yes, this author is stupid, but that's not how an appeal to ignorance works. Good? Yeah, hasty generalization makes sense, right? We need to know a lot more before we would figure out if this is the shirt that's really to blame. That's not the primary technique, though, but that is a good guess. Good? Eileen? Yes, right? This is a false cause. In a false cause fallacy, it's where you provide a cause to explain what's happening, and clearly it's a very unlikely cause, right? Maybe the real cause is coincidence or something like this, but you posit something very far-fetched as if it's the cause. So, for example, let's give another example. The Lobos lost a basketball game last weekend because I wasn't wearing my red Lobos hat. Is that the real reason they lost? No, right? That's a weird superstition. That's not the real reason they lost. What is a better reason they lost? The other team might have played better, right? That's a much more likely explanation. Good. So, in this case, false cause would get you the bulk of the credit, and then saying something like hasty generalization is forgivable, but, sorry, George, appeal to ignorance is not at work here at all. So if you did some kind of random guess like that, you would lose a little bit of credit. Example G. Gus, I am not going to take your advice on my philosophy assignment. You failed the class 7 times. And yes, that was $10 on pump 4, please. George? Unqualified authority makes sense, but if you look at it, this one is actually reversed. In an appeal to unqualified authority, you are treating someone as if they're an expert when they're really not. So if I say, Hanes makes the best t-shirts because Michael Jordan said so, Michael Jordan isn't a t-shirt expert. I'm treating him as if he is just because he's famous. That's an appeal to unqualified authority. So now think what it would mean to have a reverse of that technique. Eileen? Yes, right? This is an ad hominem, right? Ad hominem is one of the few fallacies that I leave in Latin because it is so well known. You will find throughout these examples, your English teachers, I guess they love Latin more than I do, they tend to leave things in their Latin names. Instead of red herring, they'll say non sequitur and things like this. But this one is a pretty common phrase. So ad hominem, attacking the person instead of their issue or argument. Yes? Yes, Eileen. The secondary technique here is innuendo. It's really subtle, so that's impressive, but it's in that second sentence. Yes, that was $10 on pump 4, please. Notice. Now, if they're literally at a gas station and he just happens to be asking for $10 on pump 4, then it's literal. But I think most of us are understanding it as, in this case, the pump 4, please, is being used as an indirect put down. That's what an innuendo is. So if I am grading G, ad hominem will get the bulk of the credit. And in this case, innuendo is so subtle that I don't think I would expect it, right? So I would give the full credit to ad hominem. Innuendo is impressive, though. I think it's playing a role, but I can't be sure that everyone's going to read that as figurative, $10 on pump 4, please, and not literal just by coincidence, right? So I would be forgiving there. Example H. In example H, I have never seen God, so he must not exist. George, this is yours. No, I am so sorry, George. This is not a black and white fallacy. It might look a little that way, but if we think of the issues of whether God exists or not, it's really not a gray issue. Existence is a yes or no question, so this one does admit of just two options, God existing or not. So, now to be nice, this is another one of the more difficult examples. Eileen? Yes. Darn it, George, I thought you had this one. This is an appeal to ignorance, right? So finally we found one. They're fairly rare, but notice what it's doing. It is saying, because I haven't seen God, therefore God doesn't exist. The lack of knowledge, the lack of information is used as evidence. So in this case, again, one of those cases where appeal to ignorance is the major and only technique, that would get you full credit. Example I. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness because we take these truths to be self-evident. The documents later say endowed by their creator and so forth. Right. So this is a possible fallacy in one of our founding documents. Good. George. Appeal to popularity is not really what's happening here. Now, it is a completely forgivable guess. I wouldn't count it against you at all, because it does say everyone has these rights, and it also says we take these truths, and so it almost sounds like the argument is based on other people believing this. That makes sense. It's a good guess, but the technique is more particular. Yes, Eileen, it is suppressed evidence. Notice the way it uses everyone and says the phrase self-evident. Now, what does self-evident mean? It basically means this is obvious. Well, saying something is obvious isn't really giving you evidence unless the thing really is truly obvious. But we'd have to ask, are those rights absolutely obvious? Not that obvious when you consider that these people who wrote this document owned slaves and so forth. But we'll get to the relevance of it in part 2. But for now, that is a suppressed evidence, also known as a proof surrogate. We can use those terms interchangeably. That is the primary technique and the sole major technique in that case. That would get you full credit. Example J. Jim Caviezel, star of The Passion of the Christ, supports the U.S.'s unflinching pro-Israel stance, and that guy knows more than anyone else what Jesus would do in the Middle East today. George? It's not really attacking Jim Caviezel in that sense in this case, so think of reversing it. Eileen? Yes, right. This is an appeal to unqualified authority. Because he's an actor, that is acting as if that makes him an expert on something, because he's famous, because he played a role. George? Yes. I would give a little credit if you said hyperbole, because listen to the language. That guy knows more than anyone else. That is an incredible exaggeration said about just about anybody. Appeal to unqualified authority, the major technique. Hyperbole would get you a little more credit. Appeal to unqualified authority is the main thing going on there. Example K. Jeff wants us to stop focusing our life goals around money, so he wants us all to be homeless beggars. Eileen? Yes, this is a straw man. Now, think about this. All sorts of crazy stuff Jeff might say. Is it really my position that I want you all to be homeless beggars, or is that a ridiculous summary of my actual position? That's the idea of a straw man. George? Black and white, fear. Yeah, those are forgivable guesses, right? Let me think if those are really playing a role here. They're subtle. I don't think they're obvious. I think the fear would deserve a little credit. But clearly the primary technique is straw man, and I would give a little credit to either black and white or fear in that case. Good? Example L. During World War II, the U.S. government resettled many people of Japanese ancestry into internment camps. We sure have a generous government. Now, this example has an interesting history. Before, I used to give this example without that second sentence. We sure have a generous government. And very few people found anything wrong with the first sentence. And that's fairly scary. Good? What's going on here, Eileen? Yes, this is a euphemism. They are using words to change the meanings or how a reader would understand their claims. And if you think about it, there are 3 euphemisms here. Now, of course, we're used to hearing this language. This is how every country writes its own history. But see if you can find them. What are they? Resettled? When we think of resettling, we think of, I'm going to move to a different place because I got a new job. Is that what happened to the people of Japanese ancestry? No, that would be kidnapping and imprisonment, not resettling. And yes, the last 2 words of that sentence are also euphemistic. Internment, right? That makes you think of it's an internship, like they're just being an intern. And then the last one, and we're completely used to this euphemism, camps. Are they going on walks in the forest, setting up tents, making lanyards, and roasting s'mores over the campfire? No, these aren't camps. These are prisons, right? That's another euphemism. Good. So in this case, euphemism, full credit. M, one of my favorites. You are such a stud, so you should definitely test drive one of our power trucks. Good? Yes, this is flattery. Pretty easy example, right? They are talking about how great this person is instead of talking about what they should be talking about, which is the truck or what the person's needs are for a vehicle. Now, some fallacies often occur together, right? So appeals to popularity are sometimes also suppressed evidence. In this case, an appeal to flattery is automatically another fallacy as well. Red herring. Notice, it is a red herring because it's changed the subject. It's talking about flattery instead of the topic it should be talking about. Guys? That is pretty bright, right? I don't expect most people to see that, but yes, you could see a weak analogy here. But most people are so used to this word, they don't even see it, but it calls the person a stud. If you don't know the origins of that word, a stud is a horse used just for reproduction. So it's a procreative horse, and that's how you compliment a man for being big and strong. You say he's a horse that humps other horses for a living. I don't know why that's flattery, but we have a weird language. N. We should get some ice cream from Jack's Parlor because that old guy is very friendly and rarely gets any business now that those 3 Starbucks moved in down the street. This one I think is pretty clear. We're getting good at this. Yes, this is pity, similar to flattery. And so what does that do? It also makes it a red herring. We've changed the subject into talking about the person and why we should feel sorry for them. Example O. The tax system in this country is unfair. Just ask anyone. Now, I kind of coached you a couple examples ago for here. What is this? Appeal to popularity and suppressed evidence. Instead of telling us what people actually think, it just says everyone agrees, just ask anyone. So popularity, appeal to popularity would get you the bulk of the credit. Suppressed evidence would get you the last bit of the credit. And finally, example P, you should get a health exam or you may die of cancer that could be treatable. This, yes, appeal to fear. You could also say it's a red herring, but appeal to fear does most of the work. The other smart thing you could say is, no, George, this isn't an appeal to ignorance, right? We've gone over this. Eileen? Yes, you could see this as a hasty generalization. We need a lot more information. All right, I hope you did well. So next we will turn to part 2, where we articulate the relevance of these fallacies in the examples we just covered.